I Know What You Did Last Summer is a slasher horror film from 1997 that came hot on the heels of Scream and was very much built on the success of that film. It's written, of course, by screenwriter himself, Kevin Williamson, and directed by Jim Gillespie. It follows four high school seniors about to graduate who accidentally run a man over with their car. Believing they've killed the man, they decide the best thing to do is dispose of the body and make a pact never to speak of it again. 1 year later, the four friends, now separated, are brought back together as someone begins tormenting them with notes stating, "I know what you did last summer." The film has a very generic setup as far as the core characters are concerned. It does enough to tell you who they are in the broadest of strokes. You've got the rich arsehole who has everything and acts like he's all that. You've got the guy from the poor side of town who's just trying to fit in with the popular kids. There's the prom queen pageant princess type who's probably always managed to get by on her looks. And then there's the morally upright wannabe law student who wants to do the right thing but is pushed into making the wrong choice. Once they hit someone with the car on the road, that's when the film kicks into high gear and becomes quite entertaining. I love the way the conversation plays out as to what to do with the body. That's really where you get to see who these people are. Their reasoning isn't justified, but it is understandable. Everything before that is just kind of shallow character setup, but once they have to make some serious moral choices about what they've done, it has a good degree of tension and manages to convince me of the weight that now rests upon each of their shoulders. John Galecki's in this film and he's quite fun, mainly because he's so different here to what we see him in as in The Big Bang Theory. He has the best death scene in terms of actual kills, but the kills themselves are fairly uninspired. The fisherman just tends to straight up hook them to death. But the thrills come primarily in the chase sequences that lead up to the kills. The standout being the foot chase between Fisherman and Sarah Michelle Gellar's character. Gellar is perfectly cast because she's very good at playing the naivety of a high school girl that perhaps wants to be more than what people have allowed her to be. She did that quite well on Buffy. Despite the surface level shallowness of a character like that, it's Gellar who gets you to really feel for her in the final moments, because she manages to convince you that there might have been a little bit more going on underneath the surface. And she fights so hard to survive that you can't help but root for her to make it. Ryan Phillipe plays the douchebag kid who acts like he owns everybody. Not sure he's entirely convincing, as he's always been just a bit too softly spoken as an actor. Kind of comes across like someone who tries too hard to act tough but actually isn't. Though to some degree that kind of works for the character, because at the end of the day he is a rich punk who's probably way too used to getting what he wants and just needs a good ass kicking to show him he ain't as tough as he thinks he is. And we kind of get that at one point in the film when the fisherman toys with him and he has him crying like a helpless baby on the floor. Suddenly all the bravado in him is gone. Jennifer Love Hewitt is pretty decent as our leading lady / final girl. She has the right amount of moral angst about what she's done, so that you can cheer her on, even though, as she herself points out, she is just as responsible as the rest of her friends. My main gripe with her is the sheer number of times she has to scream her lungs out in the final confrontation. It becomes quite grating on the nerves, to say the least. I get to a point where I'm like, good grief lady, hush your mush. Freddie Prinze Jr. is clearly the weakest link of the main cast, having the emotional range of a turnip. His final on-screen moments with Hewitt are cringeworthy in his delivery. It's supposed to be an emotional moment where we learn how, he had all this guilt and he was overcome with guilt and how he's so in love with Hewitt's character, but it plays as though he was reading the ingredients of the back of a cereal packet. I think Anne Hesh is pretty good here. She plays a sister of the guy that supposedly died in the car accident, and she's a bit off-kilter. It's never quite made clear if she's that way purely because of the loss of a brother or just because the family has always been that way. She seems too clean-skinned and pretty to be like your Texas Chainsaw Massacre type. Either way, I like that they explore the possible impact that our four leads' actions have had on this woman who clearly loved her brother. Hesh gets the balance right for the most part between a woman living with grief or possibly an underlying psychosis. There's one moment where she bangs on a car window and shouts to get the attention of the people inside, but the car isn't moving, so it just feels really overplayed. I blame the director for that one though, because he's clearly just going for the jump scare. Muse Watson as the fisherman makes for a fairly dull villain, really. He's quite physically imposing compared to these kids he's killing, and it's definitely a lot more menacing while he's going around in the slicker. But once he reveals himself, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, it's just some dude. I think this comes from not having him elsewhere throughout the film in plain clothes. In Scream, you have more of a connection to the killers at the end because they've been with us throughout the whole film. It's not a major gripe or anything, but I can definitely see why Ghostface or Michael Myers would become more iconic in terms of horror villains. It's a film that definitely feels like it was made at the tail end of the 90s. The music is certainly part of the reason for that. There's some good tunes on the soundtrack, but it's all stuff I wouldn't find myself listening to today. Back in the day though, perhaps, yeah. There's also the dialogue as well. The characters sometimes talk as though they were in an episode of Dawson's Creek, which is obviously not all that surprising given the Williamson connection. It kind of worked for Scream because it was constant. Here it's a bit more sporadic, so it becomes much more noticeable when it happens and therefore feels out of place. So I Know What You Did Last Summer is definitely a flawed movie for sure, but it's still one I really enjoy. I kind of like the fairly stock one-note characters and the way their moral dilemma plays out. I think it has a pretty solid amount of tense set pieces that are thrilling enough to warrant repeat viewings. And I have watched the movie many times. It's one I often go back to. It has a particular 90s sensibility to it that I find myself getting increasingly nostalgic for. I think because this and Scream were really the movies that got me into horror back when they came out. So while this doesn't come anywhere close to getting the same score that I would give to Scream, I would still encourage anyone who loved or even liked that movie to check this one out. But there you go, that's my review for I Know What You Did Last Summer. But what about you? What are your thoughts on the movie? Have you seen it? And if so, what did you think about it? Let me know down in the comments section. Also, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to smash that like button, click subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you never miss out on content from this channel. But for now, thanks for watching and until next time, cracking.